have you been filming? Because it's connected to me, so anything that's said in the film it's just gonna be me talking.
Thank you all for coming. Thanks everyone that decided to come. It's really nice and sweet. This has been a thing in the making now for probably since January. So we started this club called Rodent Society in January, late January, and the whole premise of the club is to have this space where you can just come and just be vulnerable, show your work, get critiqued, workshop, do all that sort of stuff. But ultimately it's just about community and vulnerability. And that's kind of where I'm at right now with that. And we meet every Saturday at 5 p.m. in this room. And then part of this club as well is this student-run lecture series for students. And so this is the first one right now. So you guys are witnessing some Virginia Tech, Rodent Society, lore, history unfolding right before your very eyes. And so Sydney, who's over there, is going to be giving this first lecture. And we're very excited. And she's been working super duper hard. We've been doing these dress rehearsals and then Santi, who's doing the camera, made these posters. This is one of them. They're just incredible. They're brilliant. And it was really cool. The first meeting, Sydney came in, and then I didn't know Sydney, never met her before. I was just like, you're going to give the first lecture just off of a vibe. I don't know. And then it kind of started off as a bit, but then Sydney just kind of took the bull by the horns, and she just kind of did it, and she just showed initiative. And we just would meet every Thursday, and she would just bring an outline and just these ideas, and it just started to unfold and happen naturally. And then it became a reality, and now we're going to do it, and I'm excited. Yeah, so let's do it. Cool. Yeah.
Before I start, I wanted to thank you all for coming, and they don't know that I'm doing this, but I wanted to give an incredible thank you to Ozzy and Santi and Alex. Y'all have put so much time into this, hours and hours for multiple nights and multiple weeks, and I really appreciate it. You have no idea. It would not have been possible without you, so thank you guys for your support. But I'm Sydney Dechow, and this is my lecture, Things I Think About a Lot. I see it as beauty that we rot in the ground. Our molecules mate and create a new sound. This is a line from the song I Don't Believe in God by Bont, which I found when I was about 16 years old. The rest of the song is about how a young 16-year-old's music taste would be. It's not amazing, but this line has always stood out to me. I've never forgotten it. I wrote it on my whiteboard at home, actually, and I would come home from school and look at it every day and remind myself of it. Because I think it's just such an interesting dichotomy that you can see something as terrifying and foreign and just ugly as death as beautiful. Because it really is. This idea that we become a part of things again. I just think that it is so unique, and it's something I carried with me. It's inspired my love for this series of photographs by Sally Mann, her body farm. It's a series of pictures that she took after getting permission to go onto this farm where they studied the decomposition rate of bodies for things like forensics. And there are these grotesque photos. They're hard to look at. It's human bodies like we knew these were people who once were, and we see them rotting, but at the same time, there's something eerily beautiful about them. This is a piece. This is beautiful. She brings them back to life almost in her photos, and I just think that is so interesting and is really something that I want to do. I am ephemeral. The waves hitting the legs of your beach chair, you nudge the towel just an inch back at a time. Around the same time that I found that song by Vaughn, I signed up to join my high school's robotics club. I thought that I wanted to be an engineer, maybe go into robotics, and I liked building things. That was my premise, and I was good at math, and I was a girl, so that meant that I was going to be an engineer. I really did have fun at robotics. I thought it was interesting, but there was something missing, and it was the art. These robots needed more art, and I continued to do engineering anyways. I took calculus and computer science, and after I took calculus, I decided that I was definitely not going to be an engineer anymore. I liked math, it was fun, but it was not something I needed to do for the rest of my life. Art was important to me, and it was going to be a part of my career. And I spent so much time drawing during COVID. I just began to realize how important it really was to me. This act of creation, of expressing myself, I loved it so much, and I wanted to do it as a job. I did not want to do engineering. And my mom, the wonderful woman that she is, was researching, and she found industrial design, and I knew it was the career that I wanted to do because it combined all my favorite things, like making things and coming up with ideas and doing art, most importantly. So I applied to a bunch of different design schools, and that was going to be it. I am the neighbor calling. I am asking why the weeds are growing into my grass, seeping. It is not enough to weed once a month. It has been 2 Tuesdays since then, and they grow with reckless abandon. I got denied from my top choice of school, and it was a pretty big setback at the time. In retrospect, it's something that happens to a lot of people. I'm not alone in that, but I was just so burnt out. I was done with going to school, and I really, quite frankly, needed a break. My mom encouraged me to take a gap year, and she had found this amazing program in Ireland where you would spend 3 months there with 12 other people, and it was the only gap year program that I applied to. I let it decide my fate of what I was going to do. I got in, and I deferred my enrollment from Virginia Tech, and that was where I was going to go. The program was run by this couple, Frank and Rosie. Frank was from Philadelphia, and Rosie was from the farm that the program was on in rural Ireland in Wexford. And they had met at school and were a pair of artists, and Rosie's farm has been in her family for generations. Her siblings all live there too, and she lives there with her kids, and her parents live there. And it used to be more of a place that had to do with farming. There were more cows, more livestock, but the practice has slowly fallen out of practice, and that was not something that Rosie or her siblings wanted to do. And they still have a few cows, but Rosie and Frank wanted to teach people about art, to have studio space. And so they turned 2 of the 2 old barns that were falling into disuse into a resident hall and a studio. And they created 3 programs. One, a summer program for high school students, another, a spring residency for older artists, and the last one, a fall program for college students, Fieldworks. That was the one that I took part in. Rosie is a painter and a sketcher. She makes these really beautiful oil paintings. This one is hanging up in her house, and it would honestly kind of freak me out when we would have dinners there. Frank is a photographer. He does a lot of film work. This is black and white film taken with 3 different color filters and then overlaid again to create this really interesting moving image. It's some of my favorite work of his, and I learned so much from them. I'm the television playing in the room over. I am left on, dim, tree fallen, silent. Ireland was the most beautiful place that I had ever been in the world. There is really nothing like it. If you've been there, you know there's these just huge expanses of rolling fields and livestock everywhere. Like, you can't go anywhere without seeing some sheep. And one of my favorite parts, actually, is they have these dry stone walls, which is where people hundreds of years ago took stones and stacked them perfectly to divide up land. And they hold their shape with time. It's really interesting, and they just accumulate things like moss and living animals. I love them. They had some of them at Cow House, actually, that were very much a part of the farm's history. This was actually taken in our backyard, just a little bit away from the house. There's beautiful gap in the trees coming through and shining light on us. This is the place where we stayed. This is where I lived for 3 months of my life. It was hard not to be inspired by the land around me. It's just so beautiful. I would spend lots of time walking on the farm when I wasn't in studio because there was just so much to see. There was always something going on, and there is such a rich history of Ireland's lands. Everywhere you go, you'll talk to people, and they're just excited to be there. They just love Ireland so much. And another thing that they'll talk to you about is actually folklore. They have a lot of folklore in Ireland and fairy tales and stuff. And Frank and Rosie told us about fairy portals and fairy homes, and how this place that's just a few minute walk away from the farm is a place where there are a lot of fairies, which I thought was really interesting. It's just, the land is just it's so magical, right? You can look at this and you can just tell it's magical. There's something special about it. And besides the time that we spent on the farm, we got to spend a lot of time traveling. I love this photo. It's from our first expedition that we would do every Thursday. We would leave the farm and go somewhere new. And this was to Cook Lighthouse. It's really, they have a lot of lighthouses in Ireland because it's an island, and there's this really long grass there. It's just so beautiful, and it blows in the wind because it's really windy there too. And we thought it looked like a good place to lay down, so we did. And it was really nice. And my friend Iris took this photo. They actually took all the photos before this too, a really talented photographer. But this is a photo that I took of Iris, and it was on one of the Aran Islands, Innismore. It's just the same thing. There's only 50 or so people that live there. It's a beautiful island with lots of history and rolling fields and dry stone walls. You can see them in this picture. But when I wasn't getting inspired by the land around me, I was making art. That was my only job, to wake up and to go to studio and to just be and to make art. I spent a lot of time painting, a lot of time doing photography, but I really ended up loving collage, whether with multiple mediums or just with one medium. This is part of a series of oil pastel drawings that I made, this one as well. I just really loved the bright colors, the almost childlike feel when you use them like crayons, and contrasting that with more serious topics and things that were going through my head. I would just sit down and let everything flow out of me. It was just such a creative time for me. This one's also a collage. It's a bunch of paintings, or it's a bunch of pictures that I put them on the wall around me, and I had actually never lived away from home. I'd never moved. And at this point, when I made this painting, I was feeling homesick. I had lived in Chapel Hill for all of my life, and it's just very different from Ireland, and I was in a whole other country, and I just missed almost who I was. And so to make this painting, I printed out pictures from my time back at home and my time in Ireland, and I melded them together. I painted them as if they were one, to try to make them one in my brain, to reconcile these two parts of me. It worked. I continued doing this. I made this one using a limited color palette with a bunch of photos that I had taken around the farm. And I just really love doing collage. This is probably one of my favorite pieces that I made in Ireland. It's this huge canvas that's a collection of scraps. My friends threw away their art. Everyone throws away their art, and I didn't like that. And so I would go around the studio and rummage in trash cans and ask them to give me the art that they didn't like. And I wanted to show them that even if they didn't think that it was beautiful, it was. There's some value to it. There is worth to it. It is beautiful. It's something more. Maybe you weren't looking at it the right way. And so I collaged them together on this canvas, along with trash and bits of other things and memories and things from my own process. The paper in the center is a poem that I wrote about my process. And this idea holding things valuable, of seeing that beauty in every piece of art, stuck with me. I'm gravity, the sinking in your shoes, the crawl of the blanket off the bed while you rave in stark daylight. Another thing that we did while we were at Cow House was that we had to read a chapter or two from this book, our Fieldworks reader, every week, and then we would come together and discuss it. It was just a series of essays and poems and chapters from books that Frank and Rosie really liked, and they wanted us to have access to. And by far, my favorite chapters from the reader were from this book, Conversations Before the End of Time by Susie Gablick. This book is a series of interviews by Susie Gablick. She's an art critic, and she coincidentally lived in Blacksburg here until she died. But the two chapters that they had us read in the book were Viewing the World as Process with Carolyn Merchant, an interview with Carolyn Merchant, and 10,000 Artists, Not One Master with Satyaj Kumar. And I love this book, those chapters so much that I read the whole book. I had to know more about what these people thought about art. I'm going to read a quote from the book because I think that it starts to introduce my ideas really well, and it's just so beautiful. The other example is my mother. She was a very great craftswoman. She used to make beautiful embroidery work, beautiful mirror work on shawls, skirts, blouses, anything she made. And when she'd give it to my sister, sometimes my sister would say, "Mother, this shawl is too beautiful. I can't wear it. I must put it on the wall." And my mother's answer would be, "Don't put it on the wall. It's for you. I made it for you to wear. The day you start to put beautiful things on the wall, you start to put ugly things on your body, and that is not right." This idea carries throughout the book, the idea that we have to take art off of the wall to make it something that is a part of us, and I really, really like the idea. I think that we've kind of put art away into crevices, and it's become something that's really intangible to us. That you can go to a museum and you can see the Mona Lisa, but you can't even get close enough to look at the brushstrokes. It's a mystery. Art is a secret, and we don't know how it's made. And it doesn't have to be that way. Art is not a secret. A really good example of this that happened to coincide when I was reading the book was one of my teachers in Ireland, Roisin White, made this exhibit. She's a photographer primarily. She does a lot of negatives. And she would live on the farm on the weekends in this little trailer and would come and mix the chemicals in the darkroom and teach us a few things about photography. But she also does work with kids. She loves working with kids, and she loves doing installations involving their ideas, and she does sculpture work and zines. And this is one of her sculptures. It's called The Secret Keeper. And she showed it to us when she was teaching us about her work, and I just thought it was so interesting. She really takes art off the wall. It's this monstrous sculpture in the middle of this gallery, and the viewer is encouraged to write down a secret or a trouble that you have and to put it inside this creature. It's not something that you are able to stand away from. You have to put your hand in its mouth and be a part of it for a moment. You have to interact with this thing and become one with this art, become one with Roisin even. And I loved it so much. I want to make a piece like this someday, some sort of sculpture that people have to really, really touch. I am gentle. I caress you like a lover with a heavy, greedy hand. For my final pinup in Ireland, I decided that I wanted to hang all of the things that I had made from strings on the ceiling. That in order to see my work, you were going to have to touch it. You were going to spin it around or hold it in your hands because it was not going to be easy to see it otherwise. It was an embrace. You have to shake my hand or give me a hug by holding my work in your hands. I have to become a part of you. I am the lull of sleep, the pull of the sandman, somnambulate, musing of a greater good. I took a semester to work and to make money, and then I finally returned to school. I came to VT this past fall, and I saw this as one of my first things: make mistakes faster. I had to learn this idea. I read it first, and I don't think I truly knew what it meant. But over the course of this past semester and the current semester, I have learned what this really means to make mistakes faster. To come in and to do stuff every day, whatever that means, whatever you think, whether it's someone tells you that it's terrible, you came in and you made it anyways. Because if you don't make things, if you don't make mistakes, how are you going to learn? How are you going to get better? And to be a better artist or a better designer or a better creator if you don't even try. And I have made a ton of work over the course of this semester. And this past semester, I am trying to make mistakes faster, to just come in and do what I think is interesting and to not really worry about anything else. I want to embody this idea more, to just love my practice even if I'm not always happy with the final result. And I think this idea has always sort of been a part of me. Because when I was in high school, I ran a poetry club. Yeah, I look a little bit different, but I ran a poetry club, and it was this informal thing. We would do it on Mondays, and people would come in during lunch, and we would have a prompt that I would normally pick, and everybody would write for 10 or so minutes, 20 minutes, and then we would come together and we would perform. It was a slam poetry club, and you didn't have to, it wasn't required, but you had the opportunity to come up to the podium and read your poem out loud in front of the club. The people who came to this club were not self-proclaimed poets. They were my friends. Interestingly enough, the only people that you can get to come to a poetry club are the people that really love you. But they did not consider themselves poets. They were just people who came in to write. And I think that's so important. They came and they wrote anyways. They were making mistakes faster. We were just here to learn. My teacher, the person who sponsored this club, who was the lead teacher for it, her name was Miss Rubenstein, or her name is Miss Rubenstein, but she always told us this phrase. She would say, no prefacing, no prefacing. And what that means is when you got up to the podium to tell your poem, you couldn't say anything like, this poem's really bad, or I had a lot of work to do and I only got to write for 5 minutes, so it's really short. And if we even started to try to say anything she would like that, she would be like, no prefacing, because it doesn't matter. It wasn't bad. Even if they did manage to slip a few words out and apologize for how worthless they thought the poem was still good afterwards. I never heard a bad poem during my time at Poetry Club. Never did. And we were just learning, Everybody was coming in there and being vulnerable and sharing something about their lives on the page. And it was important. It was learning. And I began to really think that maybe there was no bad poetry at all. That this art form where the only thing required of you is to just be vulnerable onto the page and to write with care meant that there was no wrong way to care or to be vulnerable, because those are just raw things. We don't need to have wrong poetry. It's all good and it's all worthwhile. So by extension, I kind of started to think that maybe there was no bad art. If people could make things like Marcel Duchamp's Fountain, which is a piece that I really love, and put it in a museum, just a urinal, something we think is gross and disgusting, and it becomes art, then maybe there was no bad art after all. That this idea, if we do something with enough intent, then it will be art. It will be beautiful. I want to read another quote from Conversations Before the End of Time. This one's from an interview with Rachel Dutton and Rob Olds. They're these two artists that, they're a couple. They made all this art over the course of their life, and then they have this rebirth, this genesis in which they destroyed everything that they had made. They sold it, or they smashed it, pottery, broken, and they went to live on the prairie. Just gave everything up and went to live on the prairie because they thought that it was the answer. And when I was first reading this chapter, when I was reading the intro and stuff like that, I was like, well, that's interesting. Because I don't know if I necessarily think that's the solution to the human condition, that we need to be alone or to give up everything. I think that community is maybe a little bit important, but I understand why, and it certainly gave them a really interesting perspective. Quote is, "Living on the prairie in the context of a larger nature that has nothing to do with culture, we slowly started living life as an art. It's as if washing dishes, if done with presence, is as much of an art form as painting a picture or making a sculpture." When I read that quote for the first time, I had to sit down, pretend the book, and be like, wow. Because it was one of those moments where you just read something and you know it's kind of going to change your life forever. And gosh, I want to live my life as art. Isn't that such an interesting idea, that with intent and love and care, that washing the dishes becomes a form of art. It's a painting, it's a piece. That is so interesting to me and just so fulfilling. It makes life a lot more beautiful when everything becomes art. I'm rising. I'm better tomorrow, not tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow. I take a lot of photos, if you can't tell. These are all negatives from my time in Ireland. I have over 350 negatives. That's 13 rolls of film that I shot while I was there. And I started to form this interesting thing that I'm sure those of you that are photographers are familiar with, that when you pick up the camera, things become a lot more interesting. That you're looking for a scene or something to shoot that really catches your eye, and there are suddenly so many more things that are beautiful. I like to call it the photo eye, and this semester I've been getting back into photography again, and it's reminded me of this, of seeing this broken and dusty and destroyed building and thinking, wow, that would be interesting. That is interesting. It holds beauty, it holds value. This was taken recently as I've gotten back into darkroom photography this semester and been able to access a darkroom. I was at the Blacksburg Tavern with Kelly, my girlfriend, and I saw the glass bottle on the table and I was like, wow, hold that up to your face. I think it would be interesting. I think it would be a cool picture. And it did. It turned out. It's that simple. Seeing the beauty and noticing interesting things. I loved to just take candid shots while I was in Ireland. Nothing I did was ever really that posed. I would just hold my camera with me, and when something interesting was going on, I would say pause, or I would try to take the picture as fast as I can. This is just a mid-action shot. I saw this empty wall in the department store, and I was like, wow, it's just beautiful. It's beautiful. Maybe there should be clothes there. Maybe you think that it looks unnatural or uncanny, but it was a perfect spot for Emma to sit. This is, again, right in our backyard, of Iris taking a beautiful photo. JJ's portrait, that's it, that's simple. It's the side of her face. I said, wow, it's really beautiful, and took it. This one is one of my favorites from Ireland. Emma was a little bit annoyed with me for this photo because I had her stand still for way too long, but she was adjusting the mascara under her eye, and I was like, wow, that is really cool. And, got more of my friends in the reflection, and she just looked, it was just so intimate. And that's what I really want to capture by taking my camera around casually, these intimate moments with my friends, because I think it's beautiful. It really is beautiful to just be living and to experience these things. And I'm so glad that I had the opportunity to have them as pieces. I love this one so much. It's just so human. It's just so human. But I try to live this every day, to continue to see everything as if I'm taking a photograph, as if it's going to be special, because it is. It really is special. I'm promises, both broken and slow. I think it comes back to this club for me, that this idea that we can bring our art in and we can talk about it informally, and we can talk about our design, even if it's not finished or we don't think it's good. It doesn't matter. We bring it to club, we bring it to rodent society anyways, and we get up and we are vulnerable and we speak about it in front of people. And there's always something to say. Nobody has ever brought up a piece and nobody's had anything to say about it. Everything that everyone brings is worthwhile. It's all beautiful. And as the first lecture, the genesis of this series that we are going to have, I want to embody this idea that we can be so vulnerable and beautiful and just love ourselves and love our work. And I want us to carry through to the next lectures and the other club meetings, that this is the real ethos of the club, to just work and to love it, to love being here. I'm going to read one final quote from Conversations Before the End of Time. It's back to that interview with Satish Kumar, the 10,000 artists, not one master. It's comes into this idea that is the chapter of the title, the 10,000 artists, not one master. And he says, "This cult of the individual has reduced art to a few great masters, and society is suffering. We have paid a big price for these great works of art. We are living in an ugly world as a result, because we have put all this art in one little corner, in a compartment, or in art schools where you go to become an artist. And then out of 10,000 students going into art college, 10 might become the masters. What a waste of energy and money and time." I cannot emphasize that enough. That every single person is important. This practice is important. That it doesn't matter. Like, we don't need to have this idea where only some people are master artists. That, like he said in the chapter, that his mother's shawls are just so beautiful. Like, she is a master artist. Nobody knows her name. She's not Pablo Picasso, but she is a master artist. And he continues this idea throughout the chapter, and a phrase that he mentions that I think really embodies this idea is that it doesn't take a special kind of person to be an artist, but that every person is a special kind of artist. And we need to bring this out into the world. This is something that I want to live, that I am a special kind of artist. You know, maybe there's practice. There's being technically good at something. There's going to figure drawing class and learning the human form and knowing how to draw it. But in the larger context, when your 2-year-old picks up the crayon and he draws a picture of him and his mother and his father, isn't that beautiful? It's something he loves. He has taken it from his heart and put it on the page. Maybe his father is made of 5 sticks and doesn't really look like his father, but gosh, it's so beautiful. It's up on the fridge. It's beautiful. And so is everything after that. Everything in between until your last piece. Everything is beautiful, and even outside of your art too, your life. I am tired of being afraid of making something or doing something because I think it's not going to be good. It doesn't matter. I'm tired of living every day and when the hard things come, wishing for tomorrow. It's not how I want to live. It's not how I want to make art, to wait until the good piece. I want to be here, to love now, to find the beauty in those horrible things, because even in the worst moment, there is something to be cherished and something to love. That everything is a part of my process, that everything culminated in Ireland to see these pictures that you have on the wall, these beautiful things. I want to live my life as art and to be beautiful, and I want you all to think about doing the same. I think that as architects, as designers, as artists, as people, that we would just be so much more and so much better if we Remember to love and to see the beauty in everything, that our lives are art. Every breath that you take as a canvas, and every day that you live as an exhibit in the museum, because it is that important. But what do I know? I've only lived one life. I'm not living you all's lives. I don't want to. It's up to you to live yours. You don't have to listen to anything that I say. But before you leave, I just want you to consider one thing. Take my art with you. Take these photos, take them off the wall, take them off the ground, take them with you. I don't care what you do with them, just don't throw them away. Turn them into something beautiful. There is beauty in everything and in nothing. Lay me down softly to be I am. Thank you all very much for coming.